So how did CSL come about in Dothan?
Marvin and I moved here in January of 1996. We got in town on a Saturday evening, and the next morning, Sunday morning, we went to the Unity service at 2323 West Main Street. We introduced ourselves, and that night, Winnie Lee Ellison, the matriarch of the group, called me up to chat and get acquainted. I told her that I was a religious science practitioner, and she said, "Oh, we had a religious science group meeting here a few years ago, and I'll put you in touch with someone in that group." So I called Betty Moore, who was one of the original people studying with Reverend Catherine Crowley from Birmingham, Alabama. And she and I chatted that night, and she said, "Well, it just so happens that we have a reorganizational meeting happening Tuesday night," and she invited us to come. So Marvin and I went and met with some people who had studied science of mind, and we inquired as to whether they would be interested in starting up a study group. They were, and we continued to meet at Ruth Granberry's house for a number of weeks. And then it became evident that we needed a more public venue. So that's the point that I approached Ken Johnson and asked if we might be able to rent space from Unity to meet during the week, since Unity was only using their rental space on Sunday mornings. So we began meeting. We changed to a Wednesday night in the process, because Wednesday night is more the traditional church service night in this area. And we started meeting on Wednesday nights, probably starting at about April of 1996. We met together with Unity at 2323 West Main Street. About that time, Christine McClellan was appointed the spiritual leader of the group. And Christine was a great marketer, and she came up with the idea to name our group the Spiritual Enrichment Center, which we all like and which has really stuck through the years. After a couple of years, it became apparent that we weren't large enough to financially support a director, and so we went back to volunteer service to run everything. Winnie Lee Ellison, in the meantime, had a dream that we would one day own our own building, and there had been a building fund that had been accruing from the beginning of Unity in about 1992, and it had grown to about $25,000, 20 to 25. So we had that money ready to use to pay a down payment. Winnie Lee worked with a former member by the name of Harriet Donifro, who was a realtor in the area, and she located this property at 942 South Oates Street. It had been vacated for a number of years. It had 2 trees laying on top of the roof with holes in the roof and the floor, and wild animals living inside. So it was a mess, and we could afford it. So we started out by continuing to meet in the West Main Street area building, while we built out the little building in the back, the chapel in the back. My husband, Marvin Davis, was the general contractor, the architect, if you will, and Don Pegg was the chief workman and the chief locator of other workmen. He had been by vocation a plumber and knew every workman in Dothan. So he was able to find the right people to do the job, including his son Scotty Pegg, who was a certified electrician. He did the build out of all the electrical system in the building. Also Steve Azoon, who can do anything and everything. He and his friend Adam were our chief workmen as far as building out the building. So for 6 months, they built out that little building until we could finally move in July of 2003. We moved into the little building, which had been made into a sanctuary, a kitchen, and an office. And we met there for 2 years while the work team built out the big building. Now, in the meantime, CSL had acquired a grant from the Hefferland Foundation for $14,000, and also a grant from the Religious Science Organization for $4,000. So that money was put towards the building, and that made Unity and CSL equal partners. And the deed was changed so that it reflected ownership of both organizations. We, at that time, we had two boards, two separate boards meeting. The Unity Board met one day, and the Religious Science Dothan is what it was called then before the branding changed it to Centers for Spiritual Living. They met another day, and it got to be a little cumbersome because any decisions concerning the building had to be okayed by both boards. So after a while, we decided it would be easier for everyone if we met together as one combined Spiritual Enrichment Center board. So that's what began to happen, and we started off with, I believe, 10 members, 4 from Religious Science Dothan and 6 from Unity, but through the years it's been pared down a few. So we still have a nice working board that has coordinated together. Now, I took my first letter of call in the building itself. The organization itself is quite unique because having Unity and CSL combined into one group is very unusual. We felt it was the very best way to do it for our area because neither group was large enough or strong enough to completely have their own group, and it would work better in our vicinity if we combined and worked together. So we did, and we're the only group that is in the country that has CSL and Unity as partners in a building location, and partners the way we do with our meetings and everything. So we call ourselves a New Thought Center because we're supported by both organizations. We're supported by Unity, that recognizes us at this time as a study group since we don't have an ordained Unity minister, and CSL, which continues to recognize us as a church. So that is how that got started and has continued very nicely to this day. I feel like we've been very progressive, and other centers have been very interested in how do we do this, and it's worked very well for us by not focusing on one or the other, but focusing on the fact that we're a New Thought teaching and learning center, and that works for all of us. So Audrey took over the leadership when I retired July 1st, 2018, and she's been the director since then, and we continue to thrive and prosper and grow and be the lighthouse in Southeast Alabama.